They told Clara Bennett she would be leaving before the sun rose, as if saying it quietly might make it feel reasonable. She stood in the kitchen with her hands resting on the back of a wooden chair, listening as her future was decided without her. The room smelled of cold coffee and damp earth tracked in from boots. Outside, the fields waited the same way they always had, patient, worn down, unforgiving. Clara had spent her whole life working that land, yet in this moment, she felt like a stranger in her own home. Clara was the older daughter, but no one ever said that aloud. Age didn't matter when beauty spoke louder. Her younger sister, Lillian, sat at the table with red eyes and trembling hands, the picture of distress. Their mother hovered near her, offering soft words and comfort. Their father stood by the window, jaw tight, staring out as if the answer might be written somewhere in the fields. The letters from the West lay stacked near the bread box. Thick paper, careful handwriting. A rancher's name signed at the bottom, Caleb Whitmore. Months earlier, those letters had been addressed to Lillian. She had read them aloud with excitement, imagining a life far from mud and hardship. When the money arrived to cover travel and arrangements, hope had filled the house like fresh air. But hope was fragile. Lillian had agreed, right up until she hadn't. The distance became too great, the land too wild, the man too unknown. She cried that she couldn't leave, that she would rather stay poor than risk everything on a stranger. And her parents, already counting on the money and the promise it carried, had turned to Clara. "You're going instead," her father said at last, not looking at her. Clara's breath caught. "He didn't choose me." "That doesn't matter," her mother replied, voice tight with worry. "He needs a wife. We've already accepted." "It's only letters," Lillian said quietly, eyes lowered. "He won't know the difference at first." Clara felt something inside her harden, not into anger, but into a familiar, aching resignation. She had been the extra hand, the quiet one, the daughter who stayed. Now she was also the solution. She spoke then, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. She said it wasn't right. She said she wouldn't pretend to be someone else. She said she deserved a choice. The words fell flat, landing nowhere. "We don't have time for this," her father said. "People are counting on us." People, not her. That night, Clara packed alone. She folded her plain dresses and wrapped her boots in cloth. She touched the walls of the small room she had slept in since childhood, memorizing the cracks and shadows. She wondered if anyone would notice she was gone for the right reasons, or only because the problem had been handled. In the early morning, the family gathered at the stagecoach station. Lillian avoided her eyes. Their mother pressed a bundle into Clara's hands and told her to be grateful. Their father gave a stiff nod, already turning away. Clara climbed into the coach without ceremony. As it pulled away, she watched the farmhouse shrink into the distance. She felt no relief, no excitement, only the weight of knowing she was being sent where she was never meant to arrive. She carried the letters in her satchel, each one written for someone else. She knew she would tell the truth when she reached the ranch. She would not begin a new life built on silence. But as the wheels rolled west and the familiar land disappeared behind her, Clara wondered if honesty would cost her the only chance she had ever been given, or if it was the first real choice she had ever made. The stagecoach lurched forward before Clara Bennett had time to settle her thoughts, as if the road itself were eager to carry her away from everything she knew. She sat stiffly on the narrow seat, hands folded in her lap, feeling each jolt through the wooden floor. The sound of the horse's hooves and the creak of leather filled the air, steady and unchanging, like a reminder that there would be no turning back. She did not look behind her. If she did, she feared she might see the farmhouse again, small and distant, and feel the pull of a life that had never truly belonged to her but was still hard to leave. Instead, she fixed her eyes on the passing land. Fields gave way to open stretches of dirt and grass. Familiar roads faded into long, uncertain miles. Inside the coach, there were 3 other passengers. An older man with a weathered face slept with his hat tipped low. A woman traveling with a child whispered soft words to keep the boy calm. No one asked Clara where she was going, and she was grateful for that. She did not know how to explain that she was headed west to meet a man who had never written her name. The letters rested in her satchel, wrapped carefully to keep them from bending. She had read them many times, enough to know them by heart. They spoke of hard work, open land, and the need for a steady partner. The words were thoughtful, measured, and honest. They had been written with care, and each time Clara reread them, she felt a strange mix of comfort and fear. At night, when the coach stopped and the passengers shared a simple meal, Clara stayed quiet. She listened more than she spoke. The talk was of roads washed out, of towns growing fast and others fading away, of how the West demanded effort from everyone who dared settle there. These stories did not scare her. Hard work was something she understood. What troubled her was the truth waiting at the end of the journey. As the days passed, the land grew wider and rougher. Trees thinned out. Hills rose and fell in the distance. The air felt different, drier, sharper. Clara watched storms roll across the plains, dark clouds moving fast, reminding her how small one person could be in such a place. During the long hours of travel, her thoughts returned again and again to the moment she would meet the rancher. She imagined his face changing when she told him the truth. Disappointment, anger, polite distance. She practiced the words silently, wanting to speak clearly and without apology. She would not pretend. She would not stay if he asked her to leave. One afternoon, the coach slowed as it approached a small frontier town. The buildings were simple, built of wood and dusted with dirt from the road. This was the last stop. Clara felt her chest tighten as she gathered her things. The other passengers stepped down, stretching and speaking with relief. Clara hesitated for a brief moment, then followed. She stood near the edge of the road, her satchel held close, scanning the faces around her. Men moved about with purpose, some leading horses, others unloading supplies. She told herself to stay calm. This was the moment she had prepared for. Then she saw him. He stood a short distance away, taller than she expected, his posture straight but not rigid. His clothes were plain and worn, marked by work rather than carelessness. He watched the stagecoach with quiet focus, as if measuring what had arrived, rather than judging it. When his eyes met Clara's, he did not smile. He simply nodded, acknowledging her presence. Clara walked toward him, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she stopped in front of him, she could see lines of fatigue near his eyes, signs of a life shaped by effort and responsibility. "Miss Bennet?" he asked. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady. He introduced himself as Caleb Whitmore. His tone was calm, respectful, no hint of suspicion. That made it harder. Clara did not wait. She did not allow herself time to doubt. She told him the truth right there on the dusty road. She explained about her sister, the letters, the decision made without her consent. She said she understood if he wanted her to leave. She said she only asked that he hear her honesty before making that choice. When she finished, the space between them felt very wide. Caleb studied her in silence. The noise of the town faded into the background. Clara braced herself, knowing that whatever he said next would shape everything that came after. Caleb did not speak right away after Clara finished telling the truth. He stood with his hands resting near his belt, eyes steady, not hard, but not welcoming either. Clara felt the weight of her words settle between them, heavy as the dust at their feet. She had done what she promised herself she would do. Whatever came next was no longer in her control. At last, Caleb spoke. "You didn't have to tell me any of that," he said. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Most folks wouldn't." Clara nodded. I wouldn't have stayed if I hadn't." He studied her for another long moment, then glanced toward the horses waiting nearby. "You can come out to the ranch," he said. "Not as a promise, just to rest. We'll decide after." It was not kindness, not rejection. It was something in between. Clara accepted it with a quiet thank you, knowing that this uncertain space was the only ground she had been offered. The ride to the ranch was silent. The land stretched wide and open, dotted with fencing and grazing cattle. The ranch house came into view at last. Solid, weathered, built to last rather than impress. Clara noticed everything: the condition of the fences, the order of the yard, the signs of careful, steady work. Inside the house, Caleb showed her a small room and left her to settle in. There were no speeches, no reassurances. Clara unpacked slowly, aware that every movement, every choice might be weighed later. She did not sit idle. When she finished, she stepped into the kitchen and began preparing a simple meal with what she found. It felt familiar, grounding. Over the next days, she made herself useful without asking for permission. She cleaned, cooked, and helped where she could. She rose early and worked until evening. Caleb watched from a distance, never interfering, never praising. His reserve felt deliberate, as if he were testing not her skills, but her patience. The ranch hands noticed her presence. Eli Turner, quiet but observant, nodded in approval when he saw her carry water without complaint. Martha Collins, a neighbor who came by with supplies, offered a polite smile and a curious glance. No one asked questions out loud, but Clara felt them all the same. Midway through the week, the unexpected came. Caleb asked her to ride with him to check a far fence line. The task was routine, but the silence between them felt heavier than before. As they rode, the land opened up into a wide valley, the wind carrying the sound of distant cattle. "You should know something," Caleb said suddenly, without looking at her. "I didn't write those letters lightly." Clara's chest tightened. "I had a wife once," he continued. "She came west believing it would be easier than it was. She left before the first winter ended." The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. This was not about pride or deception. It was about choice. "She didn't owe me anything," he said. "But I promised myself I wouldn't build this place again on a lie, even a quiet one." They stopped their horses. Clara looked at him, seeing not a rancher testing her worth, but a man guarding a wound he had never named aloud. "I didn't come to replace anyone," Clara said carefully. "I came because I was sent, but I stayed because I chose to." Caleb turned to her then, really looking for the first time. "Choosing is what matters," he said. From that moment, something shifted. He no longer watched her as a question waiting to be answered, but as a person whose actions spoke louder than her arrival. He asked her opinions. He trusted her with decisions, small at first, then larger ones. Clara felt the weight of that trust and carried it carefully. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Caleb stood beside her on the porch. "You can stay," he said. "Not temporarily, not out of obligation, but because you've been honest, even when it would have been easier not to be." Clara did not answer right away. She thought of the life she had left behind, the role she had been forced into, and the quiet strength it had taken to stand where she was now. "I will," she said at last, "as myself." Caleb nodded, accepting that answer as the only one that mattered. The sky began to change before anyone spoke of it. The air grew heavy, and the wind shifted in short, restless bursts that made the cattle uneasy. Clara noticed it first while hanging laundry behind the house. She paused, watching the clouds gather low and fast, darker than she had seen since arriving at the ranch. By midday, the first rain came down hard. It struck the ground in thick drops, turning dust into mud within minutes. Caleb came in from the yard, his expression tight but focused. "This won't pass quickly," he said to Eli Turner. We need to move the herd away from the creek." Clara did not wait to be told what to do. She pulled on her coat and followed them out. The wind pressed against her, rain soaking through her sleeves, but she kept moving. The sound of thunder rolled across the land, deep and steady, shaking the air. The creek near the lower pasture had begun to rise, water pushing past its banks. They worked fast, calling out, guiding the cattle toward higher ground. The animals were restless, confused by the noise and the rushing water. Mud clung to boots and slowed every step. Clara slipped once, catching herself just in time. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. At one point, a young calf broke away, heading toward the flooded edge of the pasture. Without thinking, Clara ran after it. The ground beneath her was slick, the rain blinding. She could hear Caleb calling her name, but the wind carried his voice away. She reached the calf near the creek, grabbing its rope just as the water surged closer. The current pulled hard, threatening to drag both of them down. Clara dug her heels into the mud, every muscle straining. For a brief moment, fear rose sharp and clear. She thought of the quiet life she had left behind, of how easily she could have stayed safe and unseen. Then she made a choice. She held on. Caleb reached her seconds later, grabbing the rope and bracing himself beside her. Together, they pulled until the calf stumbled free of the water's edge. Eli joined them, and the three moved the animal to safety. Clara's hands shook, but she stayed upright, breathing slow and steady. The storm did not ease for hours. Fences gave way. Water poured through the lower fields. By the time the rain finally slowed, everyone was soaked and exhausted. They made their way back to the house in silence. The work finished, but the weight of it still heavy in the air. Inside, Clara helped tend to the animals that had been brought close to shelter. She moved carefully, checking each one, offering calm where she could. Her clothes were muddy, her hair pulled loose by the wind, but she did not stop until everything was settled. Later, as the storm faded into distant rumbling, Clara stood at the window, watching the last of the rain fall. The ranch was quiet again, changed but standing. She felt the ache in her body and the steady beat of her heart, strong and sure. Caleb joined her, standing close but not touching. "You didn't have to do what you did out there," he said quietly. "Yes," Clara replied, just as quietly. "I did." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing the whole of her at once. The woman who had arrived with honesty, who had worked without complaint, who had faced danger without turning away. His expression softened, something unspoken passing between them. "I've worked beside a lot of people," he said. "Not many stand their ground when things turn hard." Clara did not answer. She did not need to explain herself. She had already shown who she was. That night, the storm passed completely. The sky cleared, stars appearing one by one. Clara stepped onto the porch, the cool air calming her nerves. Caleb followed, resting his hands on the railing. "You could have stayed inside," he said. "No one would have blamed you." She met his gaze. "This is my place too, if I'm going to stay." He nodded slowly. In that moment, the space between them felt different, not uncertain, not guarded. It felt shared. The storm had tested the land and everyone on it. By morning, repairs would begin. Fences would be mended. Fields would dry. Life would continue. But something had already changed. Caleb no longer saw Clara as someone passing through. He saw her as someone who belonged there, not because she had been sent, but because she had chosen to stand when it mattered most. Morning light fell softly across the ranch, touching the land that had endured wind, rain, and long days of labor. Life settled into a steady rhythm again, but something had shifted for Clara Bennett. She no longer moved through the house as a guest. Her steps were sure, her place certain. The work continued, as it always would, yet it now carried a sense of purpose that reached beyond survival. Caleb did not make grand speeches or sudden promises. His choice came in the quiet ways that mattered most. He asked Clara's thoughts before making decisions. He trusted her judgment with the ranch accounts, with the animals, with the future of the land. Each small act built toward something neither of them rushed to name. When the day came, it arrived without spectacle. Neighbors gathered at the small frontier church, its wooden benches worn smooth by time. Martha Collins arranged simple flowers. Eli Turner stood near the door, hat in hand. Clara wore a plain dress, one she had sewn herself, her hands steady as she adjusted the sleeves. She did not feel nervous. She felt ready. Caleb met her at the front, his expression calm and certain. When they spoke their vows, the words were simple. There were no promises made lightly, only a shared understanding that this life would be built together, through effort and choice. The ceremony ended quietly, but the meaning of it carried weight far beyond the walls of the church. Later that evening, Clara and Caleb sat on the porch beneath a wide, open sky. Stars stretched across the darkness, clear and countless. The land was still, resting after the long season of work and storms. Clara leaned back, listening to the sounds of the night, feeling a peace she had never known. It did not last. The next afternoon, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the yard. Clara recognized her before she spoke. Lillian Bennett stood there, dressed carefully, her posture uncertain. She looked out of place against the wide land, as if the ground itself did not quite accept her. Caleb stepped forward, his stance firm but polite. "Can I help you?" he asked. Lillian's gaze flicked to Clara, then back to him. "I believe there's been a mistake," she said softly. "I was meant to be here." The words hung in the air, sharp despite their calm tone. Clara felt the old weight stir inside her, the years of comparison, the quiet acceptance of being second. But she did not move. She did not need to. Caleb answered without hesitation. "No," he said. "There wasn't." Lillian's expression tightened. "I changed my mind," she said. "I'm ready now." Caleb shook his head. "This isn't something you step into when it suits you. It's a life, and it's already chosen." He turned slightly, placing himself beside Clara, not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. Lillian looked at Clara then, truly looked, and seemed to realize what she had missed. She said nothing more. After a long moment, she turned and walked back the way she had come. Silence followed, broken only by the wind moving through the grass. Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Caleb reached for her hand, his grip steady. "You never were a second choice," he said. "You were the right one." That evening, as the sun set and the sky deepened into shadow, Clara stood on the porch and watched the land stretch out before her. She thought of the girl who had left home with borrowed letters and no voice in her own future. That girl felt distant now, like someone she had once known. She had not been chosen by accident. She had been chosen by truth, by effort, and by the courage to stand where she was. And as the stars returned, lighting the sky once more, Clara understood something she had waited her whole life to learn. Sometimes, being sent away is how you finally arrive where you belong. If this story stayed with you, if Clara's journey felt familiar or earned, there are many more waiting to be told. Stories of quiet strength, hard choices, and finding your place when the world least expects it.